Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Hagnes. This is the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
It's going pretty good. It's weekend before New Year's, so I'm here at my hometown in my childhood home visiting my mom for a late Christmas celebration. So I'm coming to you from my childhood bedroom, which has not actually changed very much at all.
Yep.
See trophies over
Wow.
there from my very first bike contest.
I've been.
I'm not the one. I'm not the one that left them up. My
Yeah, I know,
mom.
right? Don't move those, Mom. It's interesting because I've been seeing some videos that you've been putting up on Instagram of your cycling days as a kid, and it's just amazing how almost like archaic it looks now relative to or then relative to what it is now. But it's really cool how like that was like so groundbreaking when
It
you
was
were doing it,
groundbreaking
right?
at the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
very few people did it, and there wasn't a whole lot of possibilities yet. Doors hadn't been open, so that seemed really difficult. And even some of that easy stuff isn't actually as easy as it maybe looks in comparison to what people can do nowadays.
Yep. It's interesting because like I think that's being a groundbreaker and bringing a renegade, so to speak. You're going to be ridiculed by a lot of people, but that's the only way that you're actually going to stand out, so to speak, right? So if you want to be an innovative person, you've got to do things that not a lot of people are interested in. And then from there,
Exactly.
it might take
Yeah.
a year, it might take decades, but it might actually go into a position where it becomes more mainstream. So you really never know when you're doing it because you can't look into the future. But I think it's a pretty cool thing that something they'll be able to kind of hand down to your lineage and to your kid.
Yeah. Yeah. He's getting into it a little bit now, so he's got
That's
lots
pretty
of
cool.
interest though.
Yeah. Speaking of kids, I'm giving shit to one of our athletes here. Her name is Sina Erickson. She's going to be competing at Wadapalooza in a couple weeks. Wait, what do you got? About 3 weeks left? 3 weeks. 3 weeks left. She's going to be competing
Nice.
in the teen division. She's been trying to get into the teen division for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now. So it's pretty cool to see the evolution of even teens as this sport because I think a lot of the teens, especially, they just take to it, and within 6 months, they're like, okay, they're proficient enough to be competing in a competition like Wadapalooza or the CrossFit Games. But it's interesting to see certain coaches in looking at long term progressions for these athletes and looking at what's best for them, not only physically but through other stressors like the endocrine system, joint health, structural balance, so that in the long term they don't have just a 4 year career, they maybe have a 10 year career within the sport, and they could potentially set them up for more possibilities in the long run. But
Hmm.
it'd be interesting to hear your perspective of some, say a 16-year-old came in who was looking to get better at the sport, saw some basic potential in the sport. What might be some considerations that you have, Scott, as you start to train an athlete at this level?
Yeah, I think you really want to have an eye to the future, assuming nobody really wants to come in and cash all the cards in the first few years, right?
Yep.
You know, like all aspects of the sport of fitness, the first couple of years there was a team division. Again, like the early years of CrossFit in itself, right? You just those that had some talent and some work ethic and got after it probably had a chance to do pretty well. But now, of course, it's evolved. It's more serious. Like it takes quite a dedicated approach. But with that said, does that leave you unable to be competitive for long when you're a little older in the open division, if that's a potential possibility? So I I mean my gut feeling is to hold back a little bit on certain things in the earlier years to develop a base, get structural balance in place, don't damage endocrine health, and then you'll have a stronger platform to push from down the line and a longer career.
Yeah. Would there be any things like that would be red flags for you for things like calorie intake and workload? How would you kind of what would be your bias going in, and how would you track things like that?
Man, yeah, that would be tough. Calories, yeah, of all times of your life when with a high training volume and everything else growth going on, that is extremely important. I think you'll damage things long term a lot more by being underfed as a teenage athlete than you would potentially later on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that would be important. As far as how to track that, again, that'd be kind of down to the each individual and how they're best wired. But I'm gonna assume they're pretty detail oriented if they're really pushing hard and at that level. So some form of tracking that's works so that we can stay on point there and not underfeed um, or feed at the wrong times, or etc.
Yep.
Yeah. I try to tailor that a little bit toward how each person's wired. Some people love, are detail oriented, love tracking, and other people um, will eat well, but they have a real problem with the tracking component. So finding something that's going to work.
Yep. And in terms of considerations, especially for female athletes, what would be some considerations structural balance wise early on in a career that you would consider as you start to approach, let's say, not just a short term, like flash in the pan 2 year deal, but more like a 5 to 10 year athlete in the female version of the sport?
I think the extension pattern that we see in all athletes, but uh, getting it, addressed and try to balance it out as best as possible early on.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be case by case, of course, but is there any potential hypermobility or instability that needs to be addressed?
I was going to say, boom, hypermobility and stability. Let's follow up with that then. So, what are some ways that A, you can assess, and B, what those considerations would be within the programming to ensure that this athlete has better long-term progression?
Yeah, there was so one thing, and I typically do this with anybody new at any level, is just do the Brighton hypermobility index.
Okay.
It takes a few minutes, so I get an idea right there off the bat. But with that said, you could be presented in any other joint that doesn't assess everything. So going through a kind of basic assessment, kind of a joint by joint approach, you would typically see that, and then observing training as well, you would get further clues. So then, let's just say, for example, shoulders appear to be hypermobile, not uncommon in a female population to have amazing shoulder extension, let's just say.
Yep.
But are we coming out of the front, blowing out of that anterior capsule? So we need to be doing a lot of an ongoing component of that athlete's program would have to be based around structural balance and stability work at the shoulder. So not necessarily things you would see in the sport, but I would look at lateral stability with things like, a variety of straight arm, side planky kind of stuff.
Got it.
Kettlebell, arm bars, get-ups, windmills, certain gymnastic movements and progressions to build scapular stability. And it just has to be kind of in there pretty much all the time, even if nothing more than a maintenance dose.
Yep. So almost like further out from competition season, it's more of the primary. And then as you get more toward competition season, it becomes more part warm-up, just getting touches on it. And then the primary becomes the sport itself.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a really, really good way of thinking about that, actually. So that was kind of one of the bullet points there. What other considerations long-term for female athletes in terms of structural balance? Any other areas that you would consider? Because you mentioned also, shoulder joint.
Yeah, hip, pelvis. Again, case by case, but again, common things we're going to see is a lack of ability to get full hip extension secondary to an extended posture. So some work we might need to do there. Perhaps a little direct work on could be hip adduction or could be hip abduction, depends on the athlete and the person. But again, kind of away from a competition, you're going to do more work in this area. And more into the warm-ups as you get closer to competition. But using that, you can bias loading for some of the training. It's like your narrow infrasternal angle. We've spoken about this before.
Yep.
So if I'm going to have an athlete use, say, some lunging variants, we can simply kind of address this in the middle of our loading by just having them load unilaterally in the hand of the working side, as opposed to how it's often loaded the other way. But we can bias the tissues on the inner side, but then conversely, someone in the other situation, then we would just have them load up on the other side. You could even use asymmetrically loaded double kettlebells are something to drive this a little bit as
Yep.
well. So there's lots of options, so you can start tying it into just the main training
Y-
as well.
Yep. Um, the what would be the so for you, Scott, I know that you integrate cars training into things, and obviously we have some new tools within the tool chest with some stuff from Stack Couples and PRI.
Mm-hmm.
How would you integrate cars into this, and how would you periodize that out through the year?
Yeah, so I typically will build a kind of at least some standard things to go through in warm ups, which would be kind of the bullet point cars based on each athlete. But if we're trying to improve that area in particular, it's paired in with working sets a lot. So
Yep.
there could be a few ways. Probably two ways I would chiefly do that. There might be a small circuit done at the end of the warm up where we're going to go maybe 3 rounds
Ah.
through a couple of reps of, maybe two cars, and it could be a breathing drill. It could be a work something to develop work capacity or stability in a
Yep.
joint in there. But you're going through say 2 to 3 rounds of this, and then you go into the main training. That's one way. Another way would use it a lot is as filler in sets. So say we're squatting heavy, or maybe we're doing, it could be anything. Uh, we can do some cars perhaps for the shoulder joint, because
Yes.
some
'Cause-
fatigue there is not going to mess up our squat.
Yep.
But instead of resting 3 minutes between heavy sets, you're, maybe resting a minute, spending a minute doing these cars, which is um, not easy, but it's not going to gas you out for your squats by any means. And then you have a little bit of rest and get back to your set of squats, kill some
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
gets a lot of work done that way.
Yep. Yeah, man. That's a really good point and a really good way to integrate that stuff, because it's not going to take away, and it's not really using too much of your brain power to specifically work on cars and
Yeah.
certain mobility pieces. So it's like it's just keeping you moving and keeping
Yeah.
you off your phone during your workout, so to speak, I guess.
Exactly. And if we're building up, if it's a phase we're building to a max, then no, I don't want to do that, because I want to
Yes. Okay, and
preserve
that's an
every
important indication
every
as well.
bit of brain power. But in standard course of standard training, it works pretty well.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good way of thinking about this. Um, Now, the other thing that I was actually thinking about, because someone sent me a message about uh, periodization of certain sports stuff, and I know this is a very, very deep topic, but I think we could probably integrate that into what we were talking about. So, would there obviously a basic periodization plan for most athletes is probably broken up into like 3 mesocycles in a year. You have like GPP, you have like more blended sport prep, and then you have like preseason. And then
Mm-hmm.
depending on what your role in during the season is like what you actually do there. So like that might be like a fourth block there of like a maintenance phase slash recovery.
Right.
But given that idea of a full year periodization, how would being a young female athlete, what are some of the ideas that you would come across or pop into your head um, when you think about a young female athlete or even a young male athlete, 16, 17 years old, training for the sport of fitness?
As far as blend, like in relation to how I would lay out, say, mesocycles and
Exactly, because I
roughly,
know for
yeah.
me right away, I think about like how much extra stress it is for especially female athletes. So maybe like really really deloading after the season and getting into like a fun light. Because I mean I'm just
Mm-hmm.
biasing off of my experiences, but especially female athletes, they get really really deep down
Yeah.
and they get a real big attachment toward performance and body composition
Yeah.
and all these things. So
You're,
like a good 3 month block of getting healthy might be something
mm-hmm.
that'd be very worthwhile for the 5 to 10 year athlete, and get people out of the mindset of thinking one season. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just
It
as an
takes a little bit to
example.
bridge it in. Yeah. No, that is a good point. Definitely a period of transition, and then a building period. And I typically will periodize, I guess, a macro cycle, if we want to call it 4-week block.
Uh
I
huh.
try to tailor it around the athlete's cycle
Yep.
generally and
Okay.
deload there. So that's
Great.
something you need to have some communication there, because typically you'll see injuries and things or just poor performances prop up if you don't plan for it.
Gosh,
You
so you
don't
put
want to
like a
be,
little red dot on that week, and you say deload
and
week.
you, yep, and that works well that way. But then, at other times you can push hard too, opposite of that. So
Yeah.
um, then, yeah, a longer ish off season, I guess.
Hmm.
But again, it would be relative. But just throwing out how I would expect that to work out normally. We do
Yep.
probably a little bit of a longer off season, but using skill touches as literally skill work, warm up, etc.,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and then through the other portions, hopefully the season times out, not with finals, and you have to look at the school year and
Yep.
what else is going on there as well as far as designing it. But of course, our sports seasons are out of all of our control, so um, blending it as best as possible, but knowing there might be certain periods you can push harder away from that sort of thing, and other periods where you might have to back off a bit
Yep. Yep.
to stay mentally focused.
Yeah, it was actually a really good that really good point there. And obviously, if they're younger athletes, maybe sitting down with their parents as well to kind of have that little bit of a no ambiguity going on and everything's
Yeah,
transparent and be like, listen, we are
right,
we are creatures, we are animals. Let's treat ourselves as just human beings for a second here, and let's get some information down without any weirdness in the air.
right.
And
Yep.
and that
Yeah,
allows
there's
us to be a
definitely.
lot better coaches and a lot better athletes in the process, and not have this kind of um, I don't know. We're living in 2018. I think this is a little different time for a lot of people, so everybody kind of
Yeah,
jumps to sensitivities about things. But that being said, that's the world we live in. So being able to sit down with
you have
people
to be. Yeah,
and really just
yeah.
put your intentions out there, I think that's an important part about this. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, but to tie everything up, I think we had some really good bullet points here in terms of training the youth female athlete. I think one, hypermobility in the shoulders and hips needs to be a consideration. And one way to
Hmm.
actually tackle that is through cars, whether they're, maybe in the off season ish, really focusing time on that stuff, but
Yeah,
then more during that middle portion of your training season, integrating it into things either warm ups or between sets.
between sets. Yep.
And then also ensuring that the structural balance work that we're doing is ensuring that things like the shoulder and the hip and the elbow are considered during training protocols in order for us not to
Hmm.
overwork those joints and to kind of like solidify those joints as best as possible,
Solidify. Yeah.
given the
Oh, and
athlete's ability.
yeah, and touches in frontal and transverse plane work as well
Yep,
in that
yep, that's a
phase for
very good
sure.
point, and
Yeah,
especially in the off season, and then as you
yeah, in
transition
off season.
toward the
Yeah,
season, it becomes more sagittal plane based. But we can
yeah,
still get touches and things like warm ups, and just make sure that it's not gone completely.
yeah, yeah.
In terms of endocrine system stuff, we make sure that the cycle is considered during this,
Mm.
and then in the off season, we consider like getting people back to optimal health because it's not uncommon for amenorrhea and the female triad to happen,
Yeah,
especially in the sport of fitness. This is not exclusive to just the sport of fitness. It'll happen in
oh
all
yeah,
those high area tennis, swimming, all that kind of stuff. So we're
yeah,
trying to get people back to a more balanced state because they're not going to be athletes forever. They're then going to go back to being a human being and try to do families and that kind of stuff. And you don't want to be that person who goes, oh, wow, you trained this person to the ground and now they can't have a life after sport. And I
yeah.
see it. I see people who
That
are,
does. It totally happens.
I
Yeah.
see people who are coming to me like, okay, what's the deal? They're like, I can't lose weight. I'm like, okay, what does your diet look like? Squeaky clean. What does your workout look like? They're working out 8 hours a week. I'm like, you should technically be losing weight. You're probably dead on the inside. What was your sport in college? Swimming. How often would you swim? 4 hours a day. How often? 6 days a week. I'm like, for how long? I don't know. Since I was like 8. I'm like, okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're dead. Like you got to go really, really far down that rabbit hole. And I've had those situations where it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit down and tell somebody like, yo, you're fucked. Like,
Hmm.
and I can't help you alone. You're gonna have to go see a functional medicine practitioner or someone who knows a little bit more about what's going on under the hood. Are you willing to do that? Yes, no, no. Then I can't help you because I'm not gonna just keep throwing exercise at you.
Right.
We
Yeah.
have to. I know in my good conscience that's not going to help you, and if I'm giving you something that's not going to help, I'm hurting you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yep.
I think
Yep.
it's something to consider, and I think it's a really cool topic. I know it's not something that comes up all too often, but it's pretty cool to get your ideas and maybe share my ideas with you as well.
Yeah, good topic today. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
man. You got anything else there, Scott?
No, I think we can maybe touch on next week my food poisoning of
Oh
death
yeah,
and
man.
subsequent musculoskeletal injuries, but it'll take a few minutes
Okay.
to get through that. So,
Yeah, man.
a little
Absolutely. I'd
teaser
love to hear
for
about that. A little
the
teaser
next.
for next week. Well, Scott, enjoy your trip down memory lane there. But if we want to reach you, how can we get you?
I'm Scott at Scott at CrossFitPortland.com.
That's okay, Scott. I'm Sean at Sean LaFlock at Sean at CrossFitDelrabeach.com. Scott, you screwed me up too. But
Oh
before
yeah,
we go, guys, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Please review it. 5-star reviews only. No 4-star reviews, please. Leave those to yourselves. And guys, share this with your friends who want to grow the podcast. And we have great content coming out in the new year. We have tons of interviews with the best athletes in the world. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just making that up. But it'll be entertaining in the least. Guys, we'll see you next week. Scott, you got anything else?
nope. Have a good week, brother.
I'll talk to you next week, man. Enjoy yourself.
All right.
Later, dude.
Bye.
Bye.